Hi, I'm Jacob Bonta, host of Growth and Beyond. After generating millions of dollars in pipeline value for various companies via fundamental marketing principles and leveraging modern technology, we made this show to interview top business leaders and highlight the ways to achieve growth for your business. If you'd like to level up your customer base and let us help you grow, visit testandlearnagency.com. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Growth and Beyond. Today, I'm chatting with Christian Kletzl, co-founder and CEO of UserGems, a software that helps sales and marketing teams achieve their aggressive revenue targets with less stress and more qualified pipeline. Throughout our conversation, we discussed the truth behind doing things that don't necessarily scale and the dangers of over-engineering. Christian also shares some of the biggest learnings during his time at Y Combinator. With that being said, let's get to it. Here's my conversation with the co-founder and CEO of UserGems, Christian Kletzl. All right. Hi. Hey, Christian, how's it going? Thanks for coming on the show.
Happy to be here.
All right. Well, if you don't mind, say what's up to the audience and share something that you believe to be the biggest myth when it comes to growing a business.
Damn, we're starting with the heavy questions. I think there are a bunch of truth when it comes, like truth that everyone repeats when it comes to creating a company. And I think there are some that are very, very right. For example, the truth of do things that don't scale. I think that one's very true. Like you need to figure out, is the thing actually working? So you just, whatever I can do, like do it manually. If it's a lot of work, that's totally fine. But then there's another myth that everyone repeats, and it's the myth of like, if you're not ashamed, then you waited too long. And so this is like, you should not even create the product. You should just sell like a drawing of the product, make the first money, and then you develop it. And everyone repeats this, but everyone who ever said it hasn't followed that advice themselves. They're just looking back and think, like, this could have actually maybe worked. But I've not seen anyone who's actually done it. So for me, that's a big one.
Yeah, that's huge. I never really thought about that. I love that quote you just said. If you're not ashamed, then you're waiting too long.
And I said it as this is the myth. Like there's this fine line in over-engineering or not. Like there's also this, I think the reason why this myth exists is because that last step of actually launching, of actually showing it to the world and getting that harsh truth of maybe that thing actually sucks, that is such a difficult thing to do that so many people wait. They wait until this is fully perfect. And if you do this, then you wait too long. But on the other hand, you can also do it wrong and basically not have anything. And that's why, like, the advice is always to, like, how far back can you go and, like, don't even have anything and sell it already. And this doesn't work either, but everyone repeats it as a truth. But I think it's probably even more dangerous to trying to over-engineer and having this perfect product that you then launch, because the most important quote is actually like, no product ever survived the first touch with the customer. You put it out there and then you immediately see that the thing that you thought works really well actually doesn't. And you need to make it a dozen changes before the customer is willing to pay for that.
And we're going to touch on some of that stuff here in a few, but if you don't mind sort of starting from your origin story and walking us through sort of your journey to becoming a co-founder / CEO and how you got started as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, because this is actually a really long story. And I think it more often is a really long story for a lot of people. You just typically only see the last part when you see the TechCrunch article. So, I mean, I originally am from Austria. I studied engineering there, worked for Microsoft, then came to the US to do my MBA. And that's when I started a little bit working on startups. We had something. I then started at Google, then we got into Y Combinator. I'm already speeding this up because it's a long story. But the more important part actually happens here. So we got into Y Combinator, the startup accelerator. So we actually thought we have something that works. Because like, hey, we got accepted. This is really a big deal. Turns out it wasn't, because the most important thing is actually not the accelerator. It's actually whether people are using it and whether people are paying for it. And the hard lesson for us was that actually wasn't the case. Like, we had this idea and it didn't work. And then we changed a little bit and then it didn't work. And then we changed a little bit and it didn't work either. So the really important question here is actually, at what point do you stop the pivot and say, like, this is it, this is not successful, I'm going to do something completely different. And really, that's for us actually the story of the first 4 years, I would say, where it's like, okay, we have something that sounds really good back then. What we did was we analyzed your online purchases. So we connected with the email inbox, identified what you purchased, and then we helped you resell it. So we could tell you, hey, these products that you bought, here's how you can sell them. Here's how much money you can make with the product you might not need. Sounds really good. Turns out nothing is actually worth much when you resell it other than Apple products. And I think recently designer shoes. But so that didn't work. And then we pivoted a bunch of times. But that's really the story of, like, the biggest thing for an entrepreneur is finding something that you believe works and then fine tuning until you arrive at something that actually really works, or stopping it because it doesn't.
Yeah, is there like a sweet spot where you would say it kind of like gave you the green light in terms of people actually wanting it? Like, is there a certain amount of people or is there a reaction from the person that you're looking for in order to sort of validate your thought, you know?
Yeah, and that is such an important question, because I think you always trick yourself into that might not have worked, but if we change it a little bit, then it might. And maybe I tell myself I need this milestone of, let's say, 1,000 users by X. But then X happens and you don't have the 1,000 users. So maybe that goal was unrealistic. So it's also about actually being honest to yourself to figure out, like, maybe this doesn't work. And so I think the hard part is figuring out not when something works, but when something actually doesn't work, and just pulling the plug on that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, you kind of have to know when to quit. I think that's why the saying "fail fast" is so.
Yeah.
It's almost cliche at this point, but cliches are often always right, you know?
No, I think what I find so interesting here, and I've heard this interestingly more and more over the last 2 years, it's about the opportunity cost of your life in reality. Because over, like, in 2020, 2021, a lot of founders raised a lot of money on maybe something that doesn't have as much substance as they believed in. And so now they're in this position where they actually didn't have product market fit, but they have a lot of money, so they could actually sustain working on this for quite a while. And while that's right, like, money-wise, it probably isn't time-wise, because, like, these are the best years of your life working on a startup. So at some point you need to see, like, is this actually what I want to work on, or should I actually completely pull the plug? And I think there, specifically in the last, like, 2 months, I've seen a whole lot of posts around this where startups have the money, but actually they're not going anywhere, and it's really hard to pull the plug.
And sort of speaking to that pulling of the plug, how do you think the recent Silicon Valley bank collapse is going to affect the tech industry?
I think that's the question we're all grappling with. So there's a question where it has an immediate impact, and I think the one thing we've seen is people were already evaluating every spend more thoroughly than before. And I think that just got another push. So the CFO just, like, previously you at least had money, and now you're a little bit more uncertain. So you're evaluating even more strictly. But the question long term is actually, like, are we now safe, or are we actually, like, running into the catastrophe, and what am I doing with my money? So I feel like companies are getting more and more stringent in, like, where do I put my cash? So I think right now it looks good, but I think everyone is just a little bit cautious where this is going. I think we got saved, because the thing is, even if you as a company didn't have money in Silicon Valley Bank, your customers did. And it's a whole economy, right? If your customers don't have money, they can't pay you. They're not buying you. And then your startup doesn't survive either.
Yeah. Yeah, that could have been way, way worse. Um, so there's always a silver lining, I like to say. All right, now another slight pivot, but were there any key moments or experiences that really shaped your leadership style and approach to running UserGems?
I'm not sure there was a key moment. I think it was more, if you look at the growth of the company, it was very slow until it got much faster for us. And a long period of slow growth also actually means a long period of strong collaboration between everyone in the company. Like it was a small and therefore very tight team. And when it was this small team, it was like everyone was helping each other. Everyone was super responsive. And what can I do to make the job easier for everyone on the team? Because at a small company, that's actually impossible. And I think as we were growing, the whole hope and goal is that we actually can keep this. And I wonder at what point this is going to break, but I have very much seen that everyone in the organization, if there's anything I can help someone, then I will help them. And right now, even now we're 60 people, it's still possible. So the goal is that we can do this for as long as possible.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great way of looking at that. Because I think everyone's inclination, whenever you're not necessarily growing as fast as you want to be growing, is to get frustrated. But like you said, just because you're not growing doesn't mean that there isn't other great things that are happening and benefiting the company, which is that team and unity that's growing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because of this, this then is something that comes from the top. Like I'm always responsive, or I try to be very responsive, very available for everyone, and then everyone else is too.
Awesome. Well, what inspired you to start UserGems, and how did you develop the initial concept?
So as mentioned, there were a bunch of pivots, but I think what was always interesting for us. So I studied engineering. I then did my MBA. So it's kind of like this between engineering and management. For us, it was always using technology at scale, like publicly available data to generate meaning for people. And so what I mean by this is we analyzed your email inbox, then we crawled the web to find out for how much can you sell it. That was the original premise of the product. We're now doing something completely different, right? So right now what we do is we track your user base, your champions, your buyers for job changes. And if they move to a new organization, we notify your sales team, hey, this person moved here. We notify your customer success team, hey, you lost a champion here. Maybe there's a churn risk. But the premise is actually very, very similar. We take your information, your customers, then we combine it with publicly available information, and then we generate meaning that would be really hard to extract. So for us, for me, this was always what I really enjoyed. Like this is information that's available. It just needs to be collected and put into a specific format to be useful.
Yeah, and I could see where your initial concept, I mean, I wouldn't say it's like too far off of that, but it's definitely several pivots away, you know? Yeah. That's
Pivots,
awesome.
yes.
So how did you guys approach the initial stages of building and growing UserGems? And there's always a billion challenges, but if you could highlight some of the biggest challenges you faced, I think that would be beneficial.
I would say the biggest one is actually, and I think this applies to a lot of founders, like if you're a technical founder, someone needs to take over the sales part. And in our case, it was actually my twin brother and I. So we were both probably more engineers than we were sellers. So one of us had to take over that role and actually learn from scratch. How do you actually do this? And I think there's this trial and error of how do I do this? And I remember, like, I'm so very different now in the sales motion. I'm very confident. I know I can do this, but that wasn't the case at the beginning. And it was literally just learning and like how not to do it. So to figure out how to do it. I think that was certainly the biggest challenge.
So you mentioned that you guys were pivoting or you pivoted multiple times. Was there ever a moment where you were like, I don't know if this is ever going to work? Like, basically, that moment of self doubt that just creeps in. And how did you overcome it if it did creep in, or did you not experience that at all?
There's doubt about whether the product is successful, and then there's doubt on whether you are the one who's successful. And I feel like these are two different things, right? Like, the first one you should actually have. You should understand the doubt of like, is this product gonna be successful? And if not, then you stop it. The second one is then actually the one that you need to work on, and that actually makes sure that at some point you're going to be successful because you keep working. Like, basically, we always told ourselves like, there's just no way we're going to give up. There might be a way, like there might be we're giving up with this product, with this solution, but there's not a way where we're going to give up in creating something.
Right. Yeah, that's a big one. You were all in, really. It was if that product's not going to work, then the other one will. And if that won't work, then the next one in line will. How did you guys go about acquiring your first customers? And then was there any like identification or targeting that you did on the like strategical front end of that beforehand, before going after them?
Mm-hmm. So this is really, there's a really good book, Founding Sales, that I think pretty much every person should read, but specifically every founder that starts selling, which actually gives you the foundation of identify who can benefit from your product, identify what they care about, and then generate messaging that works for them. What we did, and this actually comes back to what I said right at the beginning, is do things that don't scale. So for us, it was, once we figured out who could benefit from our product and why do they care about, then the biggest question now more than ever is, how do you reach this person, right? Like, our attention span is shorter and shorter. We get more and more emails every single day. We need to stick out. We need to have this customized message that tells me this message is really only for me. And that's what we already did back then. So I give you an example. As mentioned, we do job change tracking. So we tell you, hey, this person who bought your product at this company, let's say at Adobe, is now at Microsoft. So reach out to him again. So what we did is we went through a company's website. We analyzed the testimonials. So wherever someone said, hey, I work, like, I love your product here, and here's how I'm going to use it. Every single person, we then checked, are they actually still at the company? And if they weren't, then we reached out to like 5-10 people in that, at the company whose testimonials we looked at. And we told them, hey, like Jacob, who said, I love using product A, B, and C, is now at Amazon. Here's their LinkedIn, like here's a screenshot of their LinkedIn. If you want this for all of your users, for all of your buyers, we can do this at scale. Happy to show you. And this is one of the things, do things that don't scale. Like, this was a messaging where they know this. I did not send this message to 400 other companies because it's completely useless for the 399. But the 400 other companies got a exactly similar customized message based on their testimonials. And that means that we stuck out and people actually responded to this, and we got our first responses and then customers because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a theme that's popping up on the show a lot. When you bootstrap a company, you've got to be willing to put in the work and the sweat it takes to get to that. Because I feel like a lot of people are trying to find that silver lining, or not silver lining, silver bullet, where it's like, oh, well, I've got, all these cold email tools at my disposal where I could send thousands of emails. It's like, no. The companies that benefit from that are huge. They already have credibility. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think what I would add to this is that it's actually, like, we can see that this was a concept that worked in 2012, and I might be reading blog posts where people say it works, but that might not work anymore. We're seeing response rates dropping. Every single, like, the one truth that will be true forever is that response rates are going to drop. they're already low, and next year they're going to be lower, and the year after they're going to be even lower. So be very mindful of which advice you're listening to. And the only advice that there are basically two things that work now, and it's being super customized in your outreach where it's immediately obvious. And the second one is that one channel isn't enough. It's not only the email. I need to, where else, like cold calls, LinkedIn messages, advertising everywhere with the very same message. I need to see the company name several times until I make my first association, specifically if the company is brand new and nobody has ever heard it.
Yeah, and that makes me think like some of the sales teams that my agency works with, something that we try to stress is like, look, you because sometimes there's this hesitation, like they feel like they're being too persistent or like annoying, which I think that's all just a frame of mind. Like if you believe in the product that you're selling, and you believe that it's really going to help someone, then you should never think of it as like an annoying outreach. You know what I mean? Because I do think it's key. You can't just send an email and expect the world to come to you. You've got to be hitting them. You've got to be borderline aggressive. I know that's not a great word to use, but you just have to be aggressive with your almost like generosity. Like you want to help them, and you want to do it now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's a super important mindset. I think if you don't believe in this, then fix the reason why you don't believe in this, because you can't genuinely sell if that's not the case. And I think the second thing I would want to add as a European is that I think it's actually double hard for a European, because I think the American actually grows up selling themselves. I think there was this, like someone told me, the American sells themselves since they're 4. Okay, it's about like, how do I get into the kindergarten and then elementary school? And the one thing I always learn is selling myself and then selling something else. And the European is always a little bit more cautious. So this whole, when I started selling and someone told me that a cold calling sequence has like 9 steps, I was like, oh my God, I like this. This is exactly what you said. This is way too much. I cannot do this. But your competition does, because your competition is the American who does this. So it's very important, specifically for like Europeans, non-Americans, to be at the same level as the American.
And sort of in that vein, how do you think the rise of technology and data has impacted the way that companies approach marketing and advertising?
It's actually a topic that we are super interested in. And I think it's the one word that I always highlight, that I already did, and it's customization, right? So that's why, like, I'm glad you bring this up, because like the first thought is always, okay, I sent this cold email and all right, I'm a little bit customized there. But what really needs to be is actually that it's orchestrated and customized. So it's like I'm sending the cold email, and at the very same time, I have my advertising that is highly customized to the individual. So I'm sending an email to person A, and at the same time, an advertising to person A with the exact same message. And only if I do this, it works. And it's necessary to stick out in an environment where people don't have an attention span.
Oh yeah, 100%. Can you discuss any ways that UserGems in particular is staying ahead of the curve and remaining competitive in this insanely rapidly changing digital marketing landscape?
I mean, for us, it really is actually exactly this. So we actually orchestrate. If we reach out to a person, and this could be an SDR reaching out, it could also be an AE who's multi-threading to bring people into a meeting. So if someone requests a demo, we'll meet with this person, and then we try to bring in people from other departments, like other personas. We want to have as many people of different personas in our call, the better, as many as possible, because we've seen win rates increase. With 3 personas, if all 3 personas are involved, we have a 5x win rate. So basically, what we do there is automatically identify, like using data to automatically identify who else should we be talking to in that organization, then setting up communication to these people, as well as also pushing it directly into LinkedIn managed audiences, so that this person then sees an ad that says, hey, we're talking to your colleagues. Are you interested in joining that conversation?
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's something that has sort of popped into my head numerous times over the last year or so. But like, how do you do that? How do you get multiple people from the organization to join? Like, let's say someone fills out a form and then they hit your Calendly and they book a time. What specifically do you guys do tactically that you've seen work in order to get more buy-in from across the org? You know?
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's coming down to being a seller and understanding what a person cares about, right? So we know that we marketing benefits from UserGems, sales benefits from UserGems, operations benefits from UserGems. So if, for example, someone from marketing comes in, then we reach out to sales and we tell them, hey, we're talking to your colleagues. Typically, it's also really interesting for sales to be a part of this conversation because we solve the following problems for you. And then we have a case study of where a sales leader says, I love UserGems because they help me, like they help my SDRs hit quota, for example. So once again, it ultimately comes down to being very, very personalized to that individual's needs.
Yeah, have you seen any success? I feel like you guys are also sort of corralling internally this sort of chemistry between teams as well. Like if I'm a marketer and I fill out a form, and then Christian from UserGems says, "Hey, your sales team will really benefit from this," and they boom, 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 and then I take that same message and relay it to the sales team, and it makes me look like even better. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
That's actually one of the goals. Like, um, for example, we oftentimes see that UserGems is an initiative by marketing, but it actually really benefits SDRs hitting quota. So it's actually that it helps the relationship between marketing and sales because marketing generates really, really good pipeline for the sales pipeline that actually converts. And we've had a lot of marketers tell us like that they gained a lot of credibility in their organization because they did this. And so kind of like marketing and sales are always fighting a little bit, and we kind of actually help them work together.
That's freaking awesome. And you can never get too much of that that bridge because there's definitely some headbutting that happens. Are there any thought leaders that you'd recommend for fellow founders? I know you mentioned, I think I forget the name of the title of the book, Founding Startups or something, or maybe
Founding
author's book,
sales.
Founding Sales. Yeah.
Founding
Are
sales
there any
is,
others that you'd recommend?
I think the question is then who's the audience? I follow specifically people, founders, and
Yeah.
then sales and marketing because these are
Hmm.
my
Yeah.
areas. I think in all of these spaces there are a bunch of like there is the Rex CRO who's recently turning into a really big influencer.
Okay.
So the ex-Brex CRO, Sam Blonde. With Kristen on our team, she's a really big sales influencer. She's very good at just taking the sales process and identifying, okay, as an AE, how should you think about certain situations? So we've
Hmm.
seen that being really successful internally, but also externally.
How can people learn more about user gems or you if they like?
Oh, not sure. I'm not sure people need to learn more about me, but uh, I'm on LinkedIn, so Christian Kletzl, and then UserGems, usergems.com. I think that is the best way to learn. We've got three products. Ultimately, it's all about sales and marketing orchestration. So how can we help whatever sales, like however sales wants to generate pipeline or marketing wants to generate pipeline, how can we help you orchestrate this across the full revenue team? So we like any job movement that happens is interesting for marketing. It's interesting for sales. It's also interesting for customer success. I want to know who's joining and leaving my customer accounts. And so that's where we can really help your teams.
So I've said this. I found, or at least I found myself saying this over and over and over again recently. But how do you feel like the line between marketing and sales is going to be in the future? Do you feel like it's already blurry? And do you feel like it's going to just get more blurred in the future? Or like, what's your take on that?
Yeah. I think sales and marketing need to work together even more. I actually think it's going in the right direction. The whole ABM movement actually did a really good job there, because it meant we finally agreed on which companies we go after. So it's not that marketing advertises to these companies and sales reaches out to completely different companies. So we've already orchestrated finally on the account level. And then now there are two more steps that are missing. I think one is done reasonably well, which is aligning on messaging. There's certainly still a good job to be done. I think there will be a huge push in just making sure that the messaging we're using is consistently the same. But then the last step that's missing that we are fully focused on is orchestrating on the contact level. So now that we've agreed on the same companies, it's now very important that we agree on the same people that we're reaching out to. So for us, the big push here is if sales reaches out to, let's say, the VP of marketing, Jennifer, then marketing should advertise to Jennifer as well. So how can we best orchestrate this element? Because it's not enough anymore just on the account level.
Well, thanks for coming on the show, Christian. Really appreciate it, and super excited to see what UserGems can do with you at the helm.
Great chatting.
Thanks again for listening to another episode of Growth and Beyond. I hope you take something you learned from the conversation and apply it to your business today. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review wherever you're listening or watching, and share it with a friend. And please be sure to tune in to next week's episode where I interview another top business leader and highlight ways to achieve growth for your business. See you then. If you'd like to level up your customer base and let us help you grow, visit testandlearnagency.com.